Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn series. My name is Sydney Ross. I'm the Outdoor Education Manager for Deep Roots and one of the Native Landscape Stewards at the Discovery Center. We have a great show for you today with Private Land Conservationist Andy Carmack of Missouri Department of Conservation. Today we'll be talking about Callery Pear, how it impacts our landscape, as well as tips to manage them on your own property. But before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Special thanks to Missouri Department of Conservation, who makes it their goal to get people closer to nature through supporting our fish, forest, and wildlife. Also, thank you to Deep Roots, our organization who brings educational content to viewers like you. I also want to mention that starting today, our tickets are now live for our 2024 annual Callery Pear buyback program. After much popularity last year, we are now extended to 4 counties across Kansas and Missouri. So I will drop the link to that registration in our chat here once we get started. But I want to thank our sponsors, including our platinum level sponsor, Evergy, as well as our participating organizations, Shawnee County Parks and Recreation, Evergy Green Team, Johnson County Parks and Recreation District, Missouri Invasive Plant Council, Kansas Forest Service, and the City of Parkville in Missouri. With this Callery Pear buyback program, all you have to do is cut down your Callery Pear tree in your yard, take a picture, and join us at one of our 4 events starting April 27th. And we will give you a native tree to replace that invasive Callery Pear. It's such a wonderful program, and we hope to see you there. I also want to make an announcement about our upcoming guided naturalist walks this year. I'll be leading several hikes throughout the Kansas area, with our first one happening at Cedar Niles Park on Saturday, April 13th. You'll get a sneak preview of what we're going to see during our walk at the Lunch and Learn webinar on Thursday, April 4th. Special thanks to Johnson County Park and Recreation District for collaborating with us on this exciting program. I also want to let you know our next webinar is Thursday, March 21st, Native Plants at Noon at the Discovery Center. Alex Daniel and I will be discussing sedges, rushes, and grasses. Oh my. So be sure to tune in if you want to become or are already a sedge head. We'll talk about different plants that you can add to your own landscape. This webinar will be recorded and all of our resources will be available online. Following this presentation, I will be emailing you the recording of today's episode as well as resources discussed during the show. And don't forget, drop your comments in the chat. We already have a wonderful conversation going about people's choices for native trees that can replace Callery Pear in their yard. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. Following the show today, we'll have a moment for a quick Q&A with Andy Carmack. So if you have questions for our private land conservationists, specifically regarding invasive species like Callery Pear, let us know in the Q&A and we'll get to those questions at the end. Now I'd like to introduce Andy Carmack, private land conservationist for Jackson and Cass counties with MDC, Missouri Department of Conservation. Andy has a passion for outdoor recreation, especially hunting and fishing. He enjoys taking vacations, hunting trips with his friends and family. He's been working with Missouri Department of Conservation and their partners for about 20 years. He enjoys educating landowners about best management practices to advance conservation on their land. Now, I am so thrilled to bring this episode to you all today. I was geeking out over it as I put together this footage, and it's really insightful. So Andy is going to walk us through a conversation with landowner Roger Benson as he has observed how Callery Pear has impacted his own landscape. And from there, Andy goes into great detail on 3 different ways to treat and manage invasive Callery Pear. So let's get started. I hope you enjoy this Lunch and Learn series, Callery Pear Management with Missouri Department of Conservation.
Hello, my name's Andy Carmack. I work for the Missouri Department of Conservation. I am a private land conservationist. So what that means is I go around and I meet with landowners all across my 2 counties, and I make recommendations on how to make their property better for fish, forests, and wildlife resources. So the number one thing that I end up talking about in my job is exotic invasive species control. So when you start and think, my counties are Jackson and Cass, so we have Kansas City, and then the next county south, Kansas City is Jackson County, the next county south is Cass County. We think about all of the exotic invasive species, and a lot of these exotic invasive species originated as nursery stock, right? These were trees and plants that were planted in landscapes long before you and I were here. So the one that we're going to focus on today is called Callery Pear. So Callery Pear is an introduced exotic invasive tree species that was planted for cultivation and planted for your yards. Most people know them as Bradford or Capitol pears. It all belongs to the same family of pear trees, and they're lumped together as Callery Pear. Now, these are exotic and introduced and not native to the state of Missouri or Kansas. So the easiest identification for these trees is, here it is, today's November 11th, and what we're looking at is a tree that still has its leaves on it. So native trees, by and large, outside of the oaks, this time of year, will not have their leaves left on them. So they're easily identified in an old field situation by still having available green leaves. So when we look at this plant, you can see these leaves look like like this, right? So the berries of this are already off this individual stem, so there is no fruit left with this, but the berries look about like the size of a pea, and they're on these branches here, and this tree is distributed by birds that eat the berries, the seeds, the fruit, the pears, Callery Pear. They eat these little fruits, and then they fly off, and then they distribute them all across the landscape. And as we go through this today, I'm going to show you the identifying characteristics, how to identify it, right? When it gets to be this tall, there's some management techniques. So I want to demonstrate 3 different ways that you can control this on your property. Now, if you don't think Callery Pear is an issue, you would be absolutely dead wrong. Callery Pear, I could make a compelling argument that is the worst exotic invasive species that hit the state in the last 20 years. And the reason for this is this plant, while it's a woody stem, it's a tree, can occupy an entire variation of different habitats. Today we're in an old field situation. This can occupy in a woodland, in a forest, and an old field situation. And if you don't take care of this, over time, as the density gets more and more, and the seeds and the birds eat the berries, the fruit, they're going to deposit it across the landscape. And if nothing's done with Callery Pear on your property, in 10 to 15 years, you will have a Callery Pear forest. Now, what that does is it offsets all of the native species, all of the tree species that we really like. So the number one thing that we talk about in private land conservation is exotic invasive species removal, and in the last 10 years in Kansas City, this is the big one. So when Callery Pear gets to be about this tall, so I'm 6 foot tall, this one here is about 8 foot tall, this stem, it's easily identified. In the spring, it's the one with the beautiful white flowers. So it's going to be first to come out about March, mid-March. You'll start seeing the leaves. You won't see the leaves, you'll see the flowers first. The beautiful white flowers, and then you'll see the green leaves. This particular one, we're at the end of the growing season, so obviously it doesn't have any flowers. It doesn't have any pear berries left on it. So we're at the end of the season, but it's still holding on to green leaves. Green leaves in November typically means exotic or invasive species, and it doesn't belong here. So this is one stem that we took off of this tree. Yeah, we're here with Roger Benson, and Roger is a landowner here that we've been working with on a Callery Pear removal project. So we're going to talk a little bit about Roger and ask him some questions about why he did what he did and how he did what he did. So Roger, tell us a little bit about the property that you've got here and how long you've owned it and what you had here a few years ago.
Well, this area here has been basically a pasture for a number of years, many years, as a matter of fact. And in that period of time, weeds came in, and as you would in any situation, and that's when the Callery Pear showed up. Initially, we're talking about maybe 2 or 3 plants in one area, 2 or 3 plants in another, and very quickly it expanded to a point where we had to do something about the Callery Pear.
Sure. So that's how you saw it come in, just a little bit at a time, and then over the course of 5 years, what had happened in this particular area?
In a very short period of time, it went from scattered plants here and there to 2 or 3 areas of a true monoculture, where it was just a solid stand of Callery Pear, and anywhere from single sprouts coming up to some plants as big as 6 or 7 inch diameter stem trees, full-blown trees, and it was a mess. Is the only way I can explain it.
Sure. And with what you understand about Callery Pear, how would you describe it as far as how bad of an invasive species it is?
It's hard to talk about it without overstating, but it is extremely invasive. The plant reproduces from seeds as well as from the root system, and it's a prolific seed producer. It's the reason Bradford pears were brought into landscape was because of the flowering. It's a beautiful tree. It's got a lot of flowers, and every one of those flowers makes a little pear, and that little pear is full of seeds. And what my experience was, when that hits the ground, it's going to germinate. Those seeds are going to germinate. Then it's even worse. Birds love them. So the birds not only eat the pears, but they fly across the road and light on the fence, and the entire fence line becomes a Callery Pear forest. And so it's fast and it's aggressive.
So what did you do? What kind of practices did you do? Did you just like to mow it? What was your experience with mowing it? What was your best management on control of Callery Pear?
Start with the worst management. The worst management was mowing. Mowing does absolutely nothing to it. In fact, I would say that mowing causes multi-stems as opposed to a single stem. So mowing doesn't do anything. Tried foliar sprays, and foliar sprays were basically ineffective. They're hard to do and didn't work very well. What did work was basal bark treatment with a herbicide mixed with diesel fuel, and it was close to 100%, and it was very easy to do. You do it when the plant is fully leafed out. 2 weeks later, you can see every single plant that you treated, and you can also see every plant that you missed, which you just go back and treat the ones you missed at that point, and you can control and manage it in the area that you're working with.
Sure. So I'm going to demonstrate a little bit later on in this seminar about how to do the basal treatment for Callery Pear, but can you kind of talk a little bit about what that is and the mode of transportation and how it works?
It's very, very simple to do. It's 25% triclopyr mixed with 75% diesel or a basal oil. And the oil is there because it will hold the herbicide onto the plant, onto the bark of the plant, and you just treat from the soil line up about 15 inches on the stems. And it can be on a stem as big as your thumb or 6 inches in diameter. People worry about, did I get enough on? Did I get all the way around the stem? And the beauty of the oil is if you can get it on 3 sides, it will wrap around that stem and you'll get control. And I think the other thing is with Callery Pear, It is so susceptible to the triclopear that if you get good coverage, it's going to die.
And that's what you did here mostly.
Yes.
That was the most effective. So you didn't do a forestry shredder.
No.
Which is also the same thing as mowing, right? You're just setting back succession, and then
where we did cut trees down, we did do a stump treatment, and we used Tordon RTU on the cut surface of the stump, and it was 100% as well. There were none that came back up from those areas where the trees were big enough that we cut down.
Can you talk about, did you wait a couple days to do the cut stump treatment after you cut the trees down, or how did you do that?
Did it the same day, but did not have to rush around, and you know, it wasn't like we've got to get it right now. You've got time. The herbicide is made in such a way that it will penetrate, and so it's important to get it on that day, but it's not immediately.
Sure. Yeah, so you just want to get it done not a week later.
Yes.
Until that forms that callus over the fresh stump.
That's right.
So what would you say to landowners who have this same issue and are thinking about trying to undertake their Callery Pear?
I think the message needs to be, if you're a landowner, watch what's growing on your property. Don't wait until you see a stand of Callery Pear. By the time you see the first 2 or 3 plants, you have 200 or 300. You just haven't seen them yet.
Sure.
They're there. The first year they're only this tall, and they're in grass that's this tall. So you don't see that plant until you have an infestation. Monitor it and manage the property for the invasive species, because at the same time that you're dealing with this one, you've got teasel, musk thistle, goodness knows what else could be out there, and while you're out there, look for all of them.
Yeah, so as far as, you know, Sericea and some of these herbaceous invasive species that tend to take over fields, talk about the dangers of Callery Pear versus something that is like a Sericea that occupies a certain area.
Well, there's probably really no real difference. They're both bad, and they will both displace native plants. Everywhere that they're growing, they're displacing something we want and multiplying rapidly at the same time. So the threat is the same, it's just coming from a different source.
Sure. And how often do you monitor your property? Is this a one-time, you just deal with the Callery Pear the one time and it looks like this, or do you have to monitor and maintain, or every year do you have to do something, or is it a one and done type thing?
I look at it as it's a process, not an event. When I walk across that field, I'm looking at what plants are here. First of all, I'm looking now for the native plants that I'm trying to get to come. And so while I'm looking for them, I'll see a musk thistle or a small Sericea plant, and I want to monitor that stuff, and then when it's the right time to apply a herbicide to control it, then I come back and deal with that. But it's not like a, you know, let's go look for invasives. It's walk your property and enjoy it and look for them.
Sure, and you're just addressing the needs as they come, right? Every year you're out here,
as they present themselves.
You're looking for all of the things that that we don't want.
Yes.
You know, and so after you did this Callery Pear removal, you know, you're going to have follow-up, because there's no way you could possibly hit every single stem.
Every neighboring property has Callery Pears on it that are in full bloom, and those birds are flying to my property now because it's a nice place for a bird to come, apparently. So they bring me all these little treats from the neighbors.
Yeah. Do you think that this is sustainable? Do you think that the battle is worth fighting on the invasive species front?
I think it's an absolute necessity. I think it's that we talk about environmental issues that we face. Invasive species are a huge environmental issue. If we lose the natives, we're going to lose the pollinators, we're going to lose the bees, we're going to lose, you know, I'm not a butterfly guy, but I recognize all of this kind of works together. And I can tell you a solid stand of Callery pears is not going to be good for anybody.
Yeah, so today is the 6th of March, and we're just a little bit south of Kansas City, and you can see the Callery pear is in bloom. It's starting to bloom. It's at the very beginning of its bloom cycle. You're going to start seeing more and more Callery pear, especially on the road ditches, and now's the perfect time to start to see exactly how bad this exotic invasive species is. This web series that we're putting together is meant to educate, and Roger, we thank you for your time and showing us this project that you had here.
Absolutely.
I get the question all the time, so Andy, I got a lot of Callery pear. What do I do in order to remove it from my landscape? The problem with Callery pear is this plant is very difficult to kill. It is rapidly growing. So this tree that I'm holding on to here right now is probably about 3 to 4 years old. So in 3 to 4 years, you're getting 8 foot of growth. And that's why it was promoted by the nurseries in order to beautify your landscape, because it grows fast, produces these beautiful white flowers and these innately, what they thought at the time, sterile pears that have now conquered the landscape. So what do you do if you have pears like this size? I'm going to offer 3 different management techniques and strategies and show you exactly how to control Callery pear on your property. Now, before we get into the techniques, I need to talk to you a little bit about herbicide, because all of the techniques we're going to discuss today offer a herbicide recommendation. So when you're starting to talk about herbicide, the label is the law, right? So whatever the label says, that's the law that you must adhere to. So all of the recommendations that I'm going to give today are within labeled recommendation rates. So this is something that works well. There are other techniques that maybe you've had some success in trying to use. However, I'm going to use the industry standard, the very best things that I have found in order to control Callery pear on your landscape. So the first technique is called the basal bark application. So what we're going to do with this basal bark application is this will work on stems anywhere from 1 inch, which is about like this size here, 1 inch, all the way to 6 or 7 inches. Basal bark application. So in order to do this, you're going to need some kind of a sprayer. So I'm going to use this sprayer here, which is just a simple backpack style sprayer. No particular brand recommendation here, just any of these backpack sprayers. But the key to a basal application, because the herbicides that we're going to use are super expensive, is going to be an ultra low volume spray wand. Now this spray wand is designed to utilize the very minimum quantity, volume of herbicide to kill the plants. So what we're going to do is this spray tip is ultra low volume spray wand, produces a stream that we're going to spray on the stem. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. But what you're going to spray with, the industry standard on Callery pear for basal application is Remedy Ultra, which is this product right here, or Garlon 4, both the same. The active ingredient in this is triclopyr. So doesn't have to be Remedy Ultra, any product that contains triclopyr, and the mixing rate that you want to spray basal application is 25% Remedy Ultra, 75% diesel fuel or bark oil penetrant. Okay, so you can get these products at ag service dealers. You're not going to be able to buy Remedy Ultra at Home Depot or Walmart or any of the big box stores. You're going to have to go to an ag service like an MFA, a Nutrient Ag Solutions, anywhere that sells agricultural herbicides. So this is going to be a staple in the product in your toolbox for handling Callery pear and many other species. But Remedy Ultra, 25%, 75% diesel fuel. And what you're doing is you're allowing this product, and we're using that fuel oil or that diesel fuel in order to penetrate the bark. So I cut the bark of this tree here to show you that Callery Pear is a relatively thin barked tree. And if you can see that, it's not the thick quirky bark that other trees have. So it's easy to kill with a ultra low volume basal application. So what you're gonna do, I'll put on the spray rig here, and you want the first 18 inches of the stem, this is a 1-inch stem, the first 18 inches, so the general rule of thumb on that is from your knee down, you want to treat with this ultra low volume spray wand. So with your ultra low volume spray wand, you'll take that first 18 inches and spray the tree to where you just get it on the stem. You want to start with one side like this and come to the back side and just make sure that you get it all the way down 18 inches. So this tree now, with that Callery Pear and that Remedy Ultra, you want to make sure that you get all of that stem wet like that, would be 100% dead. Now, this application is also good for a lot of other exotic invasive species control. But with a 25% Remedy Ultra, 75% diesel fuel mix, all of this Callery Pear will be dead. And this will kill it to the roots, and it's never going to come back again. So this is going to be a dead stem. We would want you to wait 6 months to a year before you come back and you cut this down. But next growing season, when this comes down to March next year, this particular stem killed ultra low volume basil will not come back. This will not resprout, and it's that easy. So you can see with an ultra low volume wand, spray wand, the diesel fuel and the Callery Pear, you can treat hundreds of stems in a relatively short period of time with a ultra low volume basil treatment like this. So an effective, really effective way to kill your Callery Pear in an old field situation. And that application again is good for trees 1 inch like this one all the way up to 6 inches. And you can do that any time of year as long as it's not frozen, the bark isn't frozen. So you can do this in January, February, as long as it's not frozen, and then all through the growing season. So offers a really super wide window in order to kill Callery Pear with ultra low volume basil. So now we're going to look at another option. If you didn't want to spray the fuel and have to buy the ultra low volume wand, I'll give you another way that you can kill Callery Pear. So just down the hill we have a few smaller stems, and I'll talk about a foliar application, high volume foliar application, and I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see in the short walk, we walked 20 yards down the hill. You can see that the pear is everywhere. When you start to look for it, the exotic invasive species are about everywhere that you look for it. So it's the #1 thing that we fight on the farm. For our foliar application, which all this is a fancy way of saying I'm going to spray it. Most people are familiar with the concept of spraying their yard for dandelions. That's exactly what we're going to do with this, but we're going to spray it with a little bit different product. Now, I don't like trees, Callery Pear trees, foliar applications on trees that are taller than 6 foot. So this tree here is about the height that I don't like to spray foliar. If you get them to this height, I like to do ultra low volume basil like what we just discussed there. And there's different ways, different techniques, that even one more that I'll show you after this. But recent studies have found that I told you that this is a really difficult stem in a tree to kill. So the very best, the research has shown the very best product to kill this is Surmount or Tordon 22K with methylated seed oil. And what methylated seed oil is a surfactant. It helps the plant uptake. To do foliar applications like this, you need to make sure that you're using the right product. You never want to You never want to do anything that you're going to have to redo. So this is Tordon 22K. Now, this is a restricted use herbicide. So that being said, the active ingredient in this is picloram. Picloram has ecological considerations that you have to think about. This paired with the surfactant, methylated seed oil, any product that looks like this is the industry standard, and that will offer 90% control of Callery Pear when sprayed during the growing season. So foliar applications of Callery Pear need to be conducted when it's actively growing. June, July, May, June, July, anywhere in that period of time would be the time that you would apply herbicide, the Surmount or Tordon 22K, with the methylated seed oil on Callery Pear. Now, we already talked about 6 foot tall would be about the maximum, and the reason for that is a couple reasons. You know, you need to be able to get good coverage of the plant, so it's harder. You're going to use more product when the plants get taller, right? They have more leaves, and you can see this is a pear tree here and one over here. So once again, any type of tool that you use to spray will work. So this is just a solo backpack sprayer. You want to come up and you want to always keep in mind with the herbicide the right PPE, right? You need to make sure you're wearing the right personal protective equipment and follow the labeled recommendations. The label is the law. So this is for the demonstration here. I'm not wearing gloves, you can see that. This is water. So for demonstration, this is just water today. But you also have to think about environmental aspects. You don't want to spray too much herbicide across the landscape, and you want to play the wind. So you can see the wind blowing blowing in my face. So when I'm going to do this, you need good coverage of this tree. So this is high volume foliar, so I got the wind at my back now. I'm going to start at the top and just spray all of this. Now, these are contact herbicides, so you need the mode of transportation down into the roots of this plant are going to be through the leaves. So you need to get the leaves wet like that. So all the leaves on the plant need to have some herbicide. So if you look at that, that would be a good application, foliar application of Callery Pear. That will kill this tree with the Tordon 22K and the methylated seed oil. That will kill the tree and it won't come back. Just like the basil treatment, we really like about 8 months to a year before you mow this stem off. We want all that herbicide, all those leaves, while it's actively growing, to take it down and take it and kill the roots. So just a, easy enough application. And just like that, I've killed 3 Callery pears in the matter of about less than a minute. So ultra high volume or high volume foliar application done during the growing season with the right products is a super effective way to kill Callery pear. So I'm going to give you the third tool in your toolbox at the next site. So we're going to go over to this tree, and you can see that this is what most commonly happens when landowners don't address the problems as they arise, right? These trees get super tall. This one's about 8 foot tall. They get ahead of it, and now where the basil application isn't as good, it's not as easy, too tall for the foliar application. So now I'm going to teach you what they call a cut stump treatment of Callery pear. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take this chainsaw and I'm going to cut it down, and then I'm going to treat the stump with a product called Tordon RTU. So the RTU means ready to use. So this is picloram, but in a ready to use formulation. The 22K that we talked about is picloram, but in a foliar application. So this is just for cut stump treatments. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. Now, a little lesson before we go to fire up the chainsaw. Chainsaws are the single most dangerous piece of landowner equipment that there is. So in order to do this properly, you need to be properly outfitted with a pair of chaps, a hard hat, leather boots, and leather gloves with hearing protection. So we're going to show you what this looks like. I'm putting on my chaps now. We're going to cut this tree down, and then as soon as I shut off the chainsaw, we'll talk about how to do the application of herbicide. So this particular Callery Pear was multi-stemmed, and the reason that it was multi-stemmed is because it has been mowed off for many times. I see this very often. When you start to see the split stems like this means that it's been mowed off several times. So you can see the three stems that I'm focused on are these three here. So I'm going to put on the PPE, which for this Tordon RTU would be rubber gloves. And on stems that are this size, we recommend making the whole stem blue, just like this, like that. Now this mode of application is cut stump, so just like the name implies, we are cutting the tree down and we're applying herbicide to the cut surface. Now on trees that are bigger, you only need to treat the cambium layer. So the cambium layer is the only part that's actively growing. So on big trees like this, it would only be the part surrounding the bark. So it would be the first quarter inch of this tree. But on tree stems like this, where you have multiple stems, a whole blue application like that would be what we would need in order to do that. Now, the timing of this, you can kill the Callery Pear any time of the year with a cut stump treatment. So you can cut it down anytime. Most people like to run chainsaws when it's much colder out. So you can cut them down in the wintertime. As long as you treat it within 15 minutes of you cutting the stem, that will take in the herbicide. What happens a lot of times is people run the chainsaws and they go cut down the Callery Pear, and then they go back and they go to lunch. And what happens oftentimes is that stem forms a callus over that cut, and then it will not uptake the herbicide, and thus you're restarting the wheel, much like the mowing has done, starting succession over on Callery Pear. One point I just realized that I didn't talk about is how nasty these stems can be with the thorns. So a lot of people are familiar with the honey locust, the big thorns, and the hedge trees. These have thorns. These also have thorns here. So these are very woody, hard thorns that are really bad on equipment and tractor tires. This tree is one of my least favorite, and that's why I recommend that if you have Callery Pear on your property and you need more assistance, Department of Conservation, Department of Parks and Wildlife have lots of techniques and lots of literature that they can help you with, and contact your professional if you have this on your property.
That was so awesome. Thank you so much, Andy Carmack, for taking the time to educate us all on how Callery Pear impacts our landscape and what we can do about it as individuals. So now I would like to welcome Andy to the virtual stage. We have lots of wonderful questions in our Q&A. And if you all have questions, please be sure to put them there as well, and we'll get to as many as we can. So before I jump in and start asking you, Andy, I do want to just mention that someone commented on how they're already seeing lots of trees with white flowers around town. And they're wondering, are those Callery pears? And I have to say, yes, they are.
Yeah. So if you're seeing anything blooming right now, it is going to be Callery Pear. I did see some crabapple that is blooming down south, but in the Kansas City area right now, if it's got a white flower on it, it's going to be the Callery Pear.
Yeah, I think I saw my first one about a week ago, maybe last weekend. And we do have an earlier spring this year, so it makes sense that we're starting to see them come out with the warmer temps. So I want to start Laura Moreland, who is a naturalist here in Missouri. She was asking, where are Callery pears native? And I think it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, because though they pose a lot of challenges for us in our ecosystem, they are home somewhere. So do you have any insight to that you'd like to
Yeah.
share?
Sure. They are native to China and Vietnam. That's where a lot of our exotic invasive species come from. But in this particular, Callery pear is native to China and Vietnam.
Yeah, and I like to give the visual to folks. If you took the globe and draw a line from where we are across, that's typically, like you're saying, where a lot of our non-native invasives come from. So the reason being is from global transportation, we brought them here, and they thrive in our climate. So much so because they don't have any biological pressure like wildlife that has evolved to eat them and rely on them. So that's a big reason why these exotic species get out of hand in our own backyards. Okay, so I'm going to jump into some practical questions about how to remove. Joyce Grover is asking, will this stump treatment, referring to the cut stump treatment, will that travel to other root systems like non-Callery pears nearby?
So when done accurately, like what the video said, and you just apply it to the individual stump, it does not impact other tree species. Now, these Callery pears sometimes are linked. It could potentially, if they're suckers of individual trees, it could impact that, but it's not going to impact other tree species that you don't physically get that herbicide on.
That makes sense. Okay, another question. Can the Callery pear trees or sprouts that are cut down be left in place on the ground? Like, do they need to be burned afterward or hauled off? And if so, hauled off where? How would you approach that? Whether or not you're a small landowner or maybe have a larger parcel of land.
Yeah, so ecologically, once you cut the stems down and they're laying on the ground, most oftentimes the seeds have already been distributed, so they pose no impact to creating additional hazards. The only time that I would say that would be before they drop their fruit or the birds ate it. You'd want to try to get rid of that stem before those pears, had a chance to overtake an area there. As far as what you could do on your landscape, you could certainly burn them, chip them. You could get rid of them, take them to a landfill that accepts the brush and the yard waste. That would be management techniques that you could use on a smaller scale.
Okay, that's cool. It reminds me of someone on Facebook asked us in response to the promotion of this webinar. They said, "Huh, pear would that be good for smoking meat?" Have you tried that, Andy?
I have not done Callery pear, but apple and pear is good for smoking meat. I could see it being a pretty good
All
for
right.
that as well.
So for all you out there who are cutting down your Callery pears, if you try that, let us know. All right, Dan asks, any concern introducing diesel fuel into the soil with runoff and as the tree breaks down? Are there any plant-based alternative oils that you'd recommend?
Yes, so there is in the video I said, I just kind of glossed it over. The diesel fuel is just used for a bark penetrant to get that to adhere to the bark. So with these low volume treatments, we're not getting the diesel fuel. Ideally, you're not getting the diesel fuel in the soil. However, there is a product called Bark Oil Blue, which is designed for basal treatments. It is the industry standard, the bark penetrant. The reason why landowners typically don't use the bark oil blue is because it costs significantly more, 5 times more than diesel fuel to do the same thing. So if you're worried about the diesel fuel impacts, I would go for a bark oil blue or bark penetrant like that instead.
Okay, that's really good advice. And for everyone, I did put bark oil blue, bark penetrant in the chat, so you can all look that up if you're interested. Kristen asks, what's the safest application to remove Callery Pear near a pond? With that water in mind, how do you approach that, Andy?
That's a very good question because none of the herbicides are aquatic use or aquatic approved. Um, the safest would be careful application of that Tordon RTU on cut stump, and making sure that you don't do it ahead of a rainfall event, so that when you put that herbicide directly on the cut stump, that it doesn't wash or have a chance to run into the water. But if it was close to the ponds or the water, I would stick with just the cut stump treatment and making sure that my application was spot on as far as getting it directly on that, not ahead of a rainfall event.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that's similar to the same idea when you're approaching honeysuckle removal. So just it's always important to kind of be aware of the weather as you're working on these things outdoors. And it kind of following this question, Julie's asking, can homeowners purchase Tordon RTU from like a farmer supply store, or is that a restricted use chemical?
No, so the Tordon RTU is available at any of the ag stores, the Tractor Supply, the Feldman's, the Orscheln's, the Home Depots. You can buy that there. It's available for landowners, and 1 quart should be about $25 for a full quart, and you can treat several hundred stems, cut stump with 1 quart.
Nice. And I know we'll go into more specific aspects of honeysuckle removal in a later episode this year. So stay tuned, everyone, for that. But could you just briefly touch on, does that use of for the cut stump treatment, the herbicide diesel mix, does that also work for large honeysuckle, or are there better solutions for that?
No, it absolutely will work. The ultra low volume basal will work on honeysuckle as
Oh,
well.
perfect. Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. Okay. So, I think this is kind of an intriguing question, and we are going to have to wrap up here shortly. So any of the questions we don't get to, we will have responses to those with the resources following this show. But Karen Pollock is asking kind of an intriguing question. So I know every land manager has their own approach to removing invasive species. And she mentions that there was a previous speaker that talked about how Tordon could impact other plants. And I've seen this myself, specifically with pawpaw trees. So my thoughts are, and again, you're the expert here, so I'm gonna defer to you. But in my experience, like in a remnant woodland, I did remove honeysuckle using Tordon initially and noticed it had some impact on the nearby pawpaws. So the following year, we just switched to using glyphosate as the stump treatment, and that seemed to do the trick. Is that something you might recommend, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that will and can work. And like I said in the video series, what I tried to demonstrate is just the best management practices. It's not at all an all-encompassing, this is the only way you can go about skinning this cat. And it will work. I have seen collateral damage on, like, especially when, I know this is about pear, but when we start doing honeysuckle, the stem density is so high that when you start doing, each of these products has a maximum per acre threshold. And once you go over that, you can start seeing collateral damage to, like, your pawpaw trees, which are occupying the same space as in your instance, the honeysuckle. So I do understand that. As far as Callery Pear, I'm not terribly concerned about that at all.
That's really good to know. Personally, I don't have experience with removing Callery Pear. though I want to change that soon, and help out, volunteer where I can. But one other follow-up question on this, this person's specifically thinking of Jerry Smith Park. That's where they're going to be doing some Callery Pear removal. Any concerns there that they should be thinking of? I'm guessing not, because it's prairie and not woodland, but
Well, it just goes back to the label is the law, and most of the problem that people have with the herbicide is the applicator and not the product.
yeah.
So if you do it as the label suggests, and you do the minimum amount required to address the issue, you should be just fine.
Wonderful. Well, Andy, I can't thank you enough for your time today and over the past few months helping put together this very informative webinar program. So everyone give a big thank you to Andy from your seats, and we appreciate you coming out, and we will see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
You're so welcome. All right. So thank you everybody for joining us today for Lunch and Learn series, Callery Pear Management with Missouri Department of Conservation. You all brought some very thoughtful questions and comments to the center stage today, and I appreciate it. I also appreciate Andy Carmack, Private Land Conservationist with Missouri Department of Conservation. And before I leave today, I just want to remind you the Callery Pear buyback program is open, and it does take place in Kansas and Missouri. We have 4 counties that we're covering this year. So I will drop that link into the chat here in just a moment. I hope you sign up to remove your Callery Pear and get a free native tree replacement instead. And I hope you'll join us again next time. I'm Sydney Ross, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.